Okay. Hello, everybody. I hope things are going well. Um, this is Monday of Unit 3, and I wanted to try to answer just a few more questions. I'm going to try to do this in 5 minutes, maybe 10, but no more than that. Answer just a couple questions that had come up early in Unit 1. And I think that this is useful. I think it's interesting. Gives me a sense of what you're thinking and talking about. But this is the sort of stuff that in my in-person class, we would get in conversations before and after class. This would be the sort of side conversation we have during class, the unusual question that comes up that gives me a chance to talk about issues in the field, give you my opinion about things that I hope gives people a better sense of how research is done. So one of the drawbacks of online education is this opportunity to just chat and just get a sense of things. And so we try to incorporate this in it. And I've got 3 or 4 questions here I'm going to try and answer. Somebody, 1 or 2 people at least in Unit 1 asked questions that I just really couldn't figure out how to address. So that doesn't mean they're not good questions, but I'm going to push on past them and try to address a couple. And I'm not even sure how well I answer them, but I'll talk about them for just a few minutes. So somebody asked, how does communication research differ from other fields? Well, a few basics here. Communications, the field of communications is a social science. That means we're like psychology, economics, anthropology, these sorts of fields, sociology. But like some of these fields, especially maybe history and anthropology, we use a lot of both quantitative and qualitative methods. Now, some social sciences like economics use a lot of quantitative methods, a lot of numbers. Other fields like anthropology, I think maybe, uses a lot of qualitative methods. But these are by no means hard and fast distinctions. They're just tendencies in these various fields. And we're also one of those fields that kind of straddles both sets of methods. We use a lot of quantitative and a lot of qualitative methods. As I've said before, I really think now in strategic communication, we use a lot of surveys, we still use a lot of focus groups, increasingly more content analysis. I think maybe the most used methods. But a few words about communication. It's a field that derived both out of psychology, I think. People who were in psychology realized they were studying communication, but also very heavily out of what we call a functional perspective. In other words, the field derived out of journalism and public relations, as well as other fields, I think. But these are fields where they were done in practice. Journalism was done in practice, or journalists working, and there were public relations practitioners working. And then this desire and this need came up to begin training these people at the college level. And so there were classes in public relations, classes in journalism. And then as it became more advanced, more sophisticated, they began doing research in these fields, and an academic field arose. So when we talk about the field of communication, often within the field of communication, you'll see the functional applications of this field being taught. Journalism, public relations, advertising, marketing even, etc. As I said earlier in the semester, it's a remarkably diverse field. We have a lot of fields under the heading of strategic communication, so we're a big field, a big place to be. Then you say here, the questioner asks, in communications, the topics will be different. They tend to be around communication, but that still is remarkably broad. People in economics now see a market as essentially a communication phenomenon. And so we'll argue that they're really studying communication in some respect when they're studying markets. Likewise, people in politics, for example, think politics is mostly communication, at least some do. What can I do to translate my previous research background? Your previous research background should be very helpful. One thing I was going to say here on this slide was that across these fields, though, there can be differences in, well, of course, the questions you address, the things you think that are most important. But also, you'll see some differences in language, and I don't want that to throw you. So you go into a room and someone with a political science background, or maybe a sociology or psychology background, might start using different terms. One example I put in bold at the bottom, we use the term independent and dependent variable. We'll start talking about that this week or next week. I can't remember. I'll have to take a look. But we'll start talking about independent and dependent variables. In some fields, they'll have different terms. And some of the terms used are antecedent or criterion variable. And they essentially mean the same thing, but I do appreciate that a student might go into a meeting and start hearing these terms and think, oh my God, what are they talking about? They're talking about stuff that you know. They're just using slightly different language for it. And that's true in a lot of different parts of our field. But that's an easy thing to overcome. It's an easy thing to figure out. You ask a question, what is it you're talking about? And you realize, oh, that's a particular kind of variable or something else you already know. Quick question here. Research is an undeniably important part of planning a communication campaign. You cannot be strategic without research. All strategic communication campaigns begin and end with research. I've said that. Knowing your audience and how best to reach them is key. And the last paragraph here, I'm interested to know if you think communication professionals cross the line when gathering information on people to hyper-target their audience. This is kind of beyond the scope of the class, but I do want to talk about it briefly, that there are huge privacy issues. Even when you willingly give up little details about your life, where you're clicking to, etc. We're now facing questions of what happens when someone can bring all that information together to reveal things about you that you might not want to be revealed. Your political leaning, your sexual orientation, intimate habits about where you go during the day. And someone can figure this out by looking at where you click and figure out when you typically are at the grocery store and when you're typically picking up your kid at school, etc. All of a sudden, the issues of privacy become enormous. Something else I will tell you, though, I am skeptical of some of this. Many of you might be familiar with the Cambridge Analytica scandal, which is probably still underway. If not, you can Google that. It's a very interesting political issue. But a lot of the people who are hyping the hyper-targeting are people who sell this data. And I'm sometimes skeptical that it's as good as what they say it is, that they can target people so uniquely that they can sell them things that in ways that other marketing cannot. And so I think you might, as you read about these stories in the newspaper, view them with a little bit of skepticism. And then finally, the last question, I believe it's the last question. No, two more questions very quickly. This is somebody asking, how do I keep myself from going down the rabbit hole in doing a research project? Welcome to the club. People do this a lot. My students do it all the time. I think that what you have to recognize is that often continuing to read research or to study something is an excuse you're telling yourself for not doing the work. And the work is often thinking and writing. So write your project, write your paper, and when you're engaged in the writing aspect, you're probably not too deep down that rabbit hole. A lot of our research asks very, very narrow, very specific questions, and a lot of my students are big thinkers. They see all the connections in the world between all the topics in front of them, and they want to help draw those connections. But often our research projects tend to be addressing very, very narrow questions or answering one small thing that adds to the broader debate. It's a very good question. This is a very common issue. So I'm not surprised. We can talk about it some more if it comes up. And here, I believe, is the last question. The tentacles of communication research are everywhere. This is an interesting point. There are a lot of neat books out there right now about all kinds of research, but especially communication research, and it's sort of everyday applications. And they're like self-help books or books to understand things. And somebody here mentions Malcolm Gladwell, who's made a career out of understanding research and explaining it clearly. And what should be some other communication methods or studies, but really, what they're looking for here are some more sources. And I note a few here, and these are all dealing with communication topics. They're all influential and interesting books, and they all offer insights into running communication campaigns, all of them. And so these are neat books. And if you're working for a business, you're working for a university where you're engaged in campaigns, you will find insights in these books to help you out. So Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman is a really neat, very, very popular book. You can probably, you can Google these things, find the website, and you get a really good sense of what it's all about. Find a short article on the topic if you don't have time to read the whole book. Nudge is another one. This is giving people small incentives or behavioral nudges to get them to do things like vote or eat better or pick up litter or something like this. That's very cool, and that's very exciting to me, how we can do pro-social things through nudged research. And then Give and Take by Adam Grant. Anybody here involved at a university? Anybody involved in a foundation? Anybody involved with fundraising? You ought to look at the book Give and Take. Again, you might be able to Google it and find some articles about the general idea and take a look at it. But that's really cool about how to incentivize people to do things and using incentives that we haven't used in the past. It's really worth your time to learn what Adam Grant is arguing right now. Okay, I think those are a few things. I just came in just under 10 minutes. I hope you find it useful. Me talking about some stuff that I'd be talking about in an in-person class. All right, this gets us started on Unit 3. Good luck. There'll be a few more videos posted. I hope you're having a good time. And let me know if you have any questions or any comments at all. All right, thanks.